I don't know if you know this, by the way. Do you remember the German philosopher Nietzsche?
Yeah.
Right. Nietzsche is really famous. You can ask almost anybody, especially anybody from a school, tell me the famous line from Nietzsche, and they always go, God is dead.
Okay.
But they don't realize that was only half the statement. He didn't say God is dead. He said that man, this is actually what he really said.
Okay.
Man has killed God because man could no longer stand having an omnipresent, omniscient being looking at his dark side.
Amazing, eh?
Yeah. Look at the difference in that. As we spoke earlier about how these people have been misinterpreted. Oh my God, don't even get me started on that. But the thing is, he said that, and of course we know he's speaking somewhat metaphorically, but the profundity of what he's saying is very, very deep.
Yeah.
Man had to kill off the all-seeing eye being, the all-knowing being, because man was so guilty and so filthy and so unsane in his acts, his moral acts, that he could no longer stand being overseen by a pure God. And therefore came to a consensus to kill off God. So yeah, Nietzsche was making the point, albeit metaphorically, that man was aware on some level that his own behavior wasn't going to change, that he wanted to continue doing what he was doing, so he'd rather kill off the omnipotent being who would be privy to his, dark side, so to speak. And so man cutting himself loose from any type of absolute morality could then become the creature that he is. So it's really a very intriguing way of explaining this problem. And then Nietzsche went on to also say that in the after effects of killing God, he divided the human race into two different categories. Those who never had time for God in the first place, and who probably didn't believe in one, more like the atheist type, they would become what he called decadent, which means just simply libertine. Just totally, okay, God is dead, great, that lets us off the hook. And now we can go and do endless amount of just selfish behavior, and narcissistic behavior is more the correct term, and never have to worry about it. You're here for a short time in life, so just go and play hooky and have great fun, and don't give a damn about anything more, right? That's one category. The other famous category is the nihilists, the nihilism. And nihilism is the response, he said, of those who did believe in a God and can't really handle the fact that God is dead. Like all the arguments for God are null and void, they don't make any sense anymore, a rational person won't believe them. But those who had a sort of a spiritual bent, or who did, feel moral, and they could handle having a God, once that idea is destroyed in their mind, they may not become debauched or decadent, but they will become nihilistic, meaning nothing to believe in. Everything is futile, sort of like the Jean-Paul Sartre, depressive, the universe has no meaning, everything's bleak. And we do see that. We absolutely do see that kind of tradition, those two types of aftermath in the world today. And so Nietzsche was, again, continued to write about this and said that maybe, we need to replace something. You always need a code of conduct. You always do need a code of morals. And he came up with his own, which people, complained about because they didn't think it was any good. That's a separate argument about what he tried to replace, the previous traditions with. People didn't think that was very sustainable. Other people do. It's a separate question.
Yeah.
So, but what he was ultimately saying, what these kinds of philosophers are talking about, is the fact that you have to bring meaning from within inside yourself, so that regardless of whether there's a God or regardless of whether there isn't one, you have the ability to bring meaning from within yourself, meaning your inner directive. And then there's one other point I wanted to make about when you talked about 10 years ago I made this prediction. And the thing with that was that that came to me in a flash. I wrote the book in about 2000, but it was only a series of notes, or so to speak.
Okay.
And then when it finally became the book that it is now, the first version of that was like 2002. And I remember exactly because it was between November of 2001 and February of 2002 that the whole book got written. And that was unedited.
Yeah.
Right? It took the rest of the year to edit it. Well, unfortunately, in that time, a free copy got on the internet, a PDF version, and all hell broke loose because of that, Yeah, typical hassle with that. But
gosh, you got a lot of that.
While I was writing the, I don't know, it sent it to, when you send your book to get testimonials and blurbs written by other people who read. We made a mistake of sending it to people by e-book because it's less expensive than to send them the whole book.
Yeah.
And some punk, put it up on a torrent or whatever. So it's just a total disaster there. But anyway, that when the book finally came out, it was 2002, and when I was writing it, I couldn't help, I felt like there was something guiding me to write it, and I was in sort of what you might want to call one of these sort of visionary states. And, sort of step back and looking at what I was doing and thinking, what is this I'm writing? Okay, yeah, all right. I can say I've studied this all my life and put these pieces together, but I'd never wanted to publish or write anything on it. That was totally not my doing. I didn't want to do that. A sequence of events got me to do that. But while I was doing it, I was like almost in this out-of-body state where I could really see something was really telling me that we are in a very special time. It wasn't anything magnificent. It was just more like a very clear, lucid discovery, which for me at the time was very euphoric. And the feeling that, this book and this work that I'm doing and the kind of movement that I'm involved in is something very, very special. And in a very short period of time, we are going to know some very big fundamentals about who and what we are. We're really going to have the lid taken off the mystery.
Sounds like you were definitely in the right place at that time. You know what I mean? We talked about the harmony in the universe. It sounds like you'd harmonise with the chords, so to speak, at that stage.
Yeah, there was a tremendous amount of synchronicities. Even like I said, the lady who said, if you write the book down, I will edit it for you, and for free. She said she'd do it for free. As I said, it was a series of notes. And then when she said, but if you ever do this as a book, I'll edit it for free and help you put it together. And then because she was saying that she wanted to do that, I needed to write a preface or a introduction.
Yeah. I
got an email from her one day, can you write an introduction to the thing and then I can put it in front? And I didn't even know what that was. I was like, oh my God, what does that mean? Do we really need one? She goes, yeah, you should do it. So I was sitting there going, oh, here we go again. I thought I was done with this thing.
Yeah.
And it was while I was actually physically doing the introduction. Because, an introduction is usually you summarize what's in the book. You kind of boil it down and you create a couple of paragraphs for an introduction to kind of basically explain some of the background of what you've written and maybe a small précis of what you've done. So I had to do that. And it was while I was writing that introduction that this vision came, and I took a risk and then put the first paragraph saying in the next 10 years, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't feel bad about it. I didn't feel, because there's so many synchronicities going on that I felt so sure.
Yeah.
But not on a mental level, not as an author or any type of rational thing. It was a completely,
on a level of being?
Yeah, exactly. It seemed to be an out-of-body revelation that you're right. This is going to happen. And in the next 10 years, things are going to move so fast that both on a political level, on a sociological level, psychological, philosophical, you name it, we're going to have the biggest mysteries cracked. And even if people go to my forum, which is usually what I recommend them to do to prove this point, even though the forum is, incomplete, it doesn't have every revelation that has happened in the last 10 years. It's got a lot of them. And just by looking at the amazing things that have been discovered on so many different levels, is totally justified. But the most important justification is what's happening spiritually. People are now realizing that you have to be okay with deconstruction, and that you have to be okay with that so-called dark side. And that if you're not okay with it, and you keep trying to suppress these inner voices, that's another way that you enable Big Brother to do its number. That's another way of stamping like a slave, stamping the mud that makes the bricks that go to build the walls of the global village. We are making that mud, stamping it up and down like slaves. One of the ways of doing that is simply to negate what you are, the whole beingness of what you are. But people find that very hard to do now, because it says the kind of thinking that once was okay with that is basically becoming extinct. So in the talk that I'm doing now and the work that I'm doing now is to try and make people okay with that again and explain what that means, so they get a handle again on some of the fundamentals of what it means, not just to be human, that we've made a lot of progress, but what it means to be a being.
Yeah.
And see, when you get into that, then you suddenly start to realize just how many myths and how many fallacies you've embodied. All the myths of technology and science, which is very key to building the global village.